Okay, I've got two main videos, actually three main videos for you about content, but I just want to set you up for some major ideas. And these you can find in the textbook. I'm just trying to synthesize it here. So, Italian Renaissance. The general format of the class, as you can see, is that we're going to look at the three periods of the Renaissance. Those three periods are chronological. You can see basically a century apiece. The early Renaissance is essentially 1 century, middle is another 100 years, and the High Renaissance, a little less so. And that structure of the Renaissance was set up actually by a guy who lived at the end of the Renaissance, who called himself a pupil of Michelangelo. In any event, it's Giorgio Vasari who wrote a textbook, basically a biographies of the Italian Renaissance artists. He sorted them into these three chronological periods, and he wrote two versions, but in any event, both of them are from the mid 1500s. He sets up this idea that there are these three periods and that they are progressive. The metaphor he uses is that in this early Renaissance, baby steps towards naturalism, towards the art looking as naturalistic as possible, as, most like what you would see in the natural world. You and I might use the word realistic. I hope we can beat that one out of us by the end of the class. Naturalism is a more proper term. The Middle Renaissance makes some nice innovations, and so he prides those guys in this category are people like Botticelli, and in the High Renaissance, they meet the peak of this trend. And here you've got your Leonardo, Raphael, and Michelangelo, and then of course Giorgio Vasari puts his own life at the end of this. Now there's some themes of the class then are kind of tied to that three-part structure, that progressive structure that we're going to see, and I'll just very quickly here. We're going to see a change in the way artists think of themselves, less as like craftsmen or artisans and more as intellectuals by the end. So early to late or early to high Renaissance. The way in which we assign monetary value to works of art changes. In the beginning, it's all about the materials, like how much does it cost to put a painting together. And in the end, it's about the talent that the artist brings to the work of art. We'll see some changes in the way artists are trained and the way works of art are commissioned and purchased. And I use the word consume here. I'm sorry, it's a little bit of a Marxist word, but whatever, that's it. We're going to see some change in subject matter, and again, and then obviously in form. That's sort of the thing we're going to harp on today. Now, this is all informed by this idea of the Renaissance. Renaissance, as you probably know, is a French word. Beats me how the Renaissance we think of as starting in Italy, but a French word gets used to describe the period. It's a rebirth of essentially things, ideas, forms, values, practices that come out of the classical world, which umbrellas both the ancient Greeks and the Romans. Sorry, that should be a capital R. So we're going to start with the early Ren, and again, you've got two videos already in place for this guy, Giotto, who's really the kind of star player of the early Renaissance. You can see his dates there. What did he do? Well, he changed what came before. He made works of art that were more naturalistic. So what came before? The medieval period comes before the Renaissance. A typical medieval work of art looks like this. Here we have a painting of the Madonna, which means Mary, the mother of the Christ child, so Madonna and child. And, we can say basically that it's not naturalistic, that the proportions of the mother aren't great in vis-a-vis, in relationship to the child. Her head's too big, her shoulders don't seem quite to hold up, and what's with those hands anyway? So the shapes are not convincing naturalistic shapes. In terms of modeling is that use of black and white, we think of gray tones to create the sense of three dimension. three-dimensionality. And the modeling, as you can see here, it's there. You got sort of white patches, and then these striations make a darker patch. But and on her nose, you see the light and the dark, and but whatever. It looks a little artificial. And then in terms of space, I mean, there's no space here. I mean, she's against a gold background, so the gold background is very typical of medieval art. And early Ren will get rid of that. Get rid of that gold background, actually get some spatial context there, and it will also, work on these issues, other issues. I know he said Giotto was the star, but there is a guy who comes before Giotto. His name is Cimabue. Um, Actually, Cimabue is a nickname. It means, ox head. This is very typical. A lot of these names that I'm going to make you memorize for tests, etc., are nicknames, not actual names, and you can read about them in the textbook. But anyway, Cimabue, Mr. Oxhead. In any event, so he comes before Giotto, and he brings some of these innovations. So he does this large altarpiece. This is a real tiny painting. This one's much larger. I know my slide doesn't make that apparent. And it's, Madonna and Child. This one's surrounded by saints. She's in a throne, and there's some Old Testament guys in the bottom. So I just want to introduce some terms first. So again, the terms are altarpiece. It's just these big works of art that sit on top of an altar or a table in a church. Tempera on wood panel. Both these paintings are tempera paint, which is that stuff you use in kindergarten. It's a kind of matte, M-A-T-T-E paint. It doesn't have a lot of shine like oil paint, which we won't see until we won't see until later in the Renaissance. If there's shine on this painting, it's created by gold leaf. So here what you're looking at as kind of tawny brown is actually gold leaf. It looks so much different in natural light. Wood. And then just some things related to subject. In case you don't know, these things are called halos. They identify that these are holy people or holy beings. So Madonna and Child have halos. The saints, the angels do as well. The angels have wings. Notice that she sits in a bejeweled throne. This is an iconographic reference, that is, subject-wise, it refers to some architecture that is bejeweled, and that is the Temple of Jerusalem. Without getting too far into the story, let me just say that the rebuilt Temple of Jerusalem, with its new bejeweled, its walls with jewels in them, is a reference to Christ, the kingdom of Christ on earth, and so sometimes you'll see that as a kind of iconic reference to the idea that Christ came. And again, below are the Old Testament prophets. So these are the ones from the Judaic tradition who prophesied, who foretold that Christ would come. So again, this is Old Testament, and obviously Christ comes in the New Testament, the two parts of the Bible. So in any event, there's this sense that the Old Testament is the foundation for the coming of Christ, which is the New Testament, which again refers to, or which is referenced by, again, the Temple of Jerusalem throne. But in any event, look closely. You can stop the video at this point and look at maybe differences in proportions. You think this is any better than this? Difference in spatial context is some of the modeling of the drapery. Like here, you see this guy's knee sticking out here, some white and, some folds in the drapery here. Is it any better than what you see there? And hopefully the answer is yes, because this is medieval and this is early Ren. The big indicator of such progress, though, is again with our Giotto. Giotto does a similar altarpiece, again, of the same subject, essentially, is Madonna and Child with saints around, and I think these are saints, not Old Testament prophets, and then angels. The angels are the more kind of gender neutral looking people up there. With halos. And in any event, what I would like you to do, again, you can stop the video. You can see they're both in sort of bejeweled thrones, but look for the things regarding form. And has progress been made here? Is the modeling better? And I hope you would say yes here with Giotto. Look at the way he does those shadows and highlights on these draperies. Is the sense of that the Madonna, for example, especially, is sitting in three-dimensional space, in an architectural space. Is that better? Oh yeah, I think you can get the sense that at least Giotto was trying to create a three-dimensional space. And again, this pileup of angels, I mean, there's the same pileup of angels here, but they get their own kind of face time, and these saints and angels get blotted out as one would in you know, in a natural setting, if you were looking at people who are a dense crowd of people like this. So in any event, this is Giotto, A New Sense of Naturalism.